first practice debate of the season.
I would like to thank everyone for coming out to today's debate as we debate the important issue: the United States federal government should militarily intervene in Syria. Now, as the affirmative, what I'll be doing throughout my speech is I'll be going through some of the guidelines that we have and some of the framework that we have provided for today's debate. We'll be going into our plan text and then our three contentions. So we define today's motion as a policy motion because we are doing something. We are militarily intervening in this case. And as a policy motion, we define our judging criteria as the net benefits to the United States social contract. And I'll expand on that a little bit more, but for now just know that whichever team can provide the most net benefits to what the government promises its people and what the people promise its government, then that team shall win. Now, also in accordance with this being a policy motion, I'm going to go into our plan text, a way that we plan to militarily intervene. Our plan is to, as soon as possible, whenever a decision arises, we plan to militarily intervene and go with the decision that comes up, because we understand that right now in government, the United States federal government, President Obama, John Kerry, aren't exactly sure on what we're going to do, and so we are not going to provide anything that could conflict with the decision that they make at a later date. We are going to agree with and hope that whatever they come up with is the right idea, and we will support that starting now. So, going into my first advantage of today's of our plan and why this is a good thing and why you should support the affirmative. It's this point of justice. We have to understand that whenever we go to war, or whenever we do anything for that matter, the decision must first be made on whether or not it's just. Now, there are a couple of theories surrounding justice, but one specifically for war is called the just war theory. And under just war theory, there is a principle called jus ad bellum, and that Latin term basically means the justice of intervening, the justice of war. And we have to understand here is that under jus ad bellum, if there is a humanitarian crisis, that is enough justification under this theory to intervene. And we have clear and definitive evidence providing the fact and proving the fact that there is a humanitarian crisis in Syria. We understand that according to the Huffington Post, over 100,000 Syrians have been killed to this date, over 1,000 of which were killed with the use of chemical weapons. So it's imperative that we intervene in Syria and stop this from happening, and it's imperative that we do this in order to uphold justice. But the impact of this is larger than justice. The impact of this is the idea of establishing justice. One of the foundations of our country and one of the foundations of the social contract. The United States federal government promises to establish justice for all of its people, so it's imperative that we act on this alone so that we can do so and so that we can uphold and we can benefit the people under their social contract here in America. Now, my second contention is this idea of credibility. We have to understand that because the United States has the largest military in the world by far, that in order to keep this stability, in order to keep this safety that we have, we must not only use hard power in form of threaten to do things, but if we make a threat, we must follow through on that threat, or else we lose all of the credibility that threat holds. We have made several threats in the past, all of whom we have followed through with, which is why which we can credit our security on today based on that. So Obama, earlier in the Syrian civil war, in the Syrian conflict, promised that if chemical weapons are ever used in Syria during the conflict, we will intervene. we will take military action, and we will put Assad to rest. That was the plan, and that was the threat. We must go through with this today, and you must vote for the affirmative in intervening in Syria so that we maintain the credibility that we have as a country. And the impact of this is the idea of being secure. It's also the idea of providing for the common defense. Another thing that the United States social contract promises for the people. We promise to provide for the common defense. We promise to keep our people secure, and we must follow through with our threat in order to prevent outside attacks and keep our people in America secure. And that links directly out to our judging criteria, again, of net benefits to the people under the social contract. So moving into my third and final contention. My third contention is about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We understand right now that there has been a conflict going on in Israel that has been happening for decades, that has killed millions of people, a large amount of people, and is something that needs to stop. There have been attempts in the past to stop this conflict, but nothing that shows promise until now. Now there are peace talks going on amongst Israel and Palestine, in which USA Today claims are the most promising yet. We understand here that we are on the brink of ending the conflict in Israel, which is crucial, which is why it's imperative that we make sure nothing happens as these talks are carried out, so that we can reach a compromise and we can reach an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have to understand here that Syria is providing weapons, is providing support to the main opponents of Israel. It's providing support to Lebanon, which then goes to Hezbollah. It's providing support to Hamas, which is stationed directly in Palestine. And we have to understand here is that these weapons are being used and ending and prolonging the conflict that we see in Israel. So we need to stop. We need to cut that link off. We need to stop President Assad. We need to stop the support of Hezbollah and stop the support of Palestine if we want to see an end in the Israeli conflict. So for those three reasons, I urge a strong vote for the affirmative. Thank you.
Both teams, I'm going to remind you, this is a parliamentary debate. If you're not writing the next speech, the other speaker is up there, you should ask me a point of information. Don't forget to ask points of information.
Is everyone ready? Okay. With that, I'll begin. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for being here today and making this debate possible. Our judge, our opponents, and my partner, as well as the large audience here today. So a really quick roadmap. I'm going to go through the definitions and things set for today's debate. I'm going to address my opponent's plan, their contentions, and then I'm going to go into our plan and our contentions. So to start off, we agree with their definitions. This is a policy motion. We agree with the Jody criteria and net benefits to the social contract. However, we had some problems with their plan. Their plan was that as soon as possible, we need to militarily intervene in Syria, and we're just going to go along with whatever Obama and Kerry say. Well, this is dangerous, and this is really dangerous, because Obama and Kerry haven't made their statements yet. So the affirmation team is agreeing with something in the future that isn't unknown. They're agreeing with this huge potential thing to cause conflict, more and more conflict in the Middle East. I'll get more into the conflict that this would cause in our contentions, but I just want to make it very clear to everyone here today that their plan is to go with whatever Obama and Kerry say in the future, and we don't know what that is. So we can't vote for that because we don't know what that is. We have no idea what they're going to do, whether it's going to be good or bad, or whether or not we really do agree with it. So going into their contentions, their first contention is that of justice and the just war theory. And they brought up the justice of intervening and how we need to intervene in humanitarian conflicts and give humanitarian aid. Well, under the just war theory, it also says that they have to be a threat to us, and they have not threatened us yet. And the affirmation team, in their other contentions, got into how, well, we need to keep ourselves safe, and we need to, if we don't go in there, we're going to mess up the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm going to refute that later, but so far it's not a threat to us. Yes?
You understand that your only reputations are our point about justice is the fact that we have to have a threat to us, but under the just war theory, you only have to have one of the few points. So if you are
I'm not done repeating your point either. Sorry. And then they said that we must establish justice for our people, and this supports the social contract. We need to establish justice for the people, but the people are here in the United States, not in Syria. Syria is not the United States. That's not our issue. We are not upholding their social contract. That's their government. That's their problem, not ours. We need to uphold our social contract and our benefits to the American people. And as I go through my case, I will actually prove how the affirmation team is harming our social contract. I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. I'll get to it in the end if I can. Their second contention is that of stability, and they said that we must oversee our threats. We made this threat, now we have to go in there and prove that we're right, prove that we're going to do it, prove that we stick to our word. This is a slippery slope. They're saying that if we don't stick to our word now, we'll never do it in the future, or we will weaken our own self-defense. We don't know that. If we don't stick to it now, we're just saying that, look, we have our responsibility to ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves first. Not that we are going to threaten the rest of the world or put the rest of the world make the rest of the world unstable. I'd also like to add that they cannot argue stability, because if we go in there and give military aid, we will be adding fire to fire, and it will actually inflame the rest of the Middle East. And I'll get into that more in my third contention. I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. I have time at the end. I will get to you. Their third contention is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They said that nothing has happened before, and we've done nothing to prevent this conflict or help it, and now all of a sudden there are peace talks. These peace talks are great and wonderful. And that is great. Don't bother them. Don't inflame the entire Middle East and upset these peace talks. We need to keep those going. And right now, they're going just fine. If we go into the Middle East and we inflame the region, it's just going to blow up even more, and we could actually end up harming ourselves. So I've now repeated their entire case, and I'm going to go into our case. We have four contentions with several subpoints, actually. So our first contention is that conflict would increase, and our evidence comes from an Iranian spokesman who says that military involvement in Syria will lead to consequences for the entire region. So this goes to refute their second and third contentions, which were about we need to stabilize the region and the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. Because if we go in there and give more firearms and more aid and more weapons to anyone in the Middle East, we're just going to inflame and engulf the entire region even more. And we can't do that. We can't disrupt the peace, some stability that there is now. Our second contention is that of public opinion. The New York Times/CBS poll says that 64% of the U.S. does not believe that the U.S. should do anything. And then a Reuters poll taken only 1 week ago said 9% believe that the United States has any obligation at all to go into the Middle East. So we're looking at a very, very small percentage of 9% of the population that believes there's any reason to go into the Middle East at all. And that's simply undemocratic. We can't do that. Our third contention is that of the United Nations Security Council. The UN Security Council must first determine the existence of any threat to peace. This is in the Article 39 of the United Nations Security Council Conduct Code book. So the United Nations is in there right now determining whether or not weapons were used, or chemical weapons were used, and by who. And they have confirmed that chemical weapons were used. We don't know by who yet. We don't know who issued them. We don't know if it was the government, like everyone is saying, or if it was actually the rebels using them against the government, and now they're saying, well, look, we were attacked, you need to help us. So we have to, according to the United Nations, we have to wait until they confirm that and make that announcement. The United Nations also said in Article 41 that the United Nations may decide what measures are to be employed. So before we go into the Middle East, we have to confirm with the United Nations and say, and get their approval of what measures we go to implement in the Middle East. So in this case, the UN must first confirm the use of chemical weapons by the government on the people, and they must also approve of the techniques we use to aid them. Our fourth contention has two subpoints. Our fourth contention tagline is there's danger in weapons. Subpoint A is that it is difficult to discriminate the good rebels from the bad rebels and the good people from the bad people. We could be giving weapons to anyone in the Middle East, good or bad, and it's really hard to tell who we're giving them to. And that's one of the reasons why the United States government is so weary of giving any aid at all, because we don't know who they're going to. And then subpoint B is kind of evidence for this. Aid is not effective. We gave aid to Pakistan, and according to a Harvard study in 2009, over half that aid, 59%, was used for things other than what we agreed for them to be used by. So our trust has already been violated by Middle Eastern countries. We cannot continue giving aid to people who could possibly be dangerous, because that would be harming ourselves. That would be inflaming the terrorism. That would be harming our nation and going against the social contract, our deed to protect the United States people. And so for those reasons, I'd urge your vote in favor of the negation.
What was the tab on your?
It was just a form thing in everything.
All right, is everyone ready? With that, I'd like to begin. So first of all, I'd just like to extend my partner's gracious blanket of thanks to the judges, our opponents, and of course my partner for being supportive. So just going over a quick roadmap, I'd like to, first we're going to be going over the arguments that they had against our plan, then I'll be going over and strengthening our 3 contentions, and then I'll be going over their 5 contentions, and proving to you why every single one of, or their 4 contentions, and proving to you why every single one of them is wrong. So our plain text, it was basically saying that we're going to follow through with what the government plans. And they said that this is dangerous because they haven't made any official statements. I have 2 refutations to this. The first being that the point is that it's about what should we do. The motion here is the U.S. should militarily intervene. So what we're trying to argue here is not necessarily how we militarily intervene, whether it be missiles, whether it be we have soldiers go over there, whether we just give them money. It doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that we should be intervening because of our 3 contentions, the fact that we need justice, we need credibility, and we also need to stop the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So my second contention to the point that they're saying that this is dangerous and that they haven't made any statements at all isn't true, because we've said, or Obama has said that they're considering sending over missiles. So it's not like we have no idea of what's going to be happening. We have a little bit of idea, but what our partner and I are arguing for, we don't want this debate to come down to what should happen, but why it should happen. So our first contention going into that is about justice, and we talked about the just war theory that is clearly written for you up on the board, and talking about Usaid Bellum, and they made 2 points here. And the first was that we need to have a threat to us to be able to militarily intervene into a country. But as I pointed out in my POI, that's not the only thing that's not the only way to establish justice in war. The second way, as my partner said, is if there's a humanitarian need. That's enough justice to go into a war. The just war theory is a little bit confusing, but the basics is that if someone's being killed, if there's a humanitarian need, then there's justice to start a war against another country to militarily intervene because people are being killed. And our evidence, over 1,000 people alone have been killed from chemical weapons. And 100,000 overall have been killed during the Syrian conflict. So obviously, we need to intervene so that we can stop these killings. Now, our second contention was about credibility, and we're the largest military in the world, and we need to maintain our stability in our military. And we talk about that. And what our basic point here is that Obama made a statement saying that if we cross the red line, there's no going back, and saying that basically saying if chemical weapons are used in Syria, we will intervene. It wasn't a maybe we will or we can. It was a we will intervene. There was a direct threat here, and by not pulling through with our threat, we are losing all credibility that we have in our military. And the only thing they say to that is that, well, we need to take care of ourselves first, and we're not proving anything by not going through with our threat. But any possibility of losing our credibility is huge in the big picture of things. There's a huge, even if it's 1%, even if there's only a 1% chance that we're going to lose any credibility with one country, that's one country that will no longer trust us militarily. So it's huge that we're losing all credibility just by not pulling through this one statement saying that we need to militarily intervene because chemical weapons were used. So for this 1 point alone, we're losing all of the credibility that we fought wars for 200 years. It is important that we militarily intervene in Syria. So our third contention was about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For decades, millions have been killed in Israel and Palestine, and peace talks are finally happening. And it is the most promising yet since USA Today. And basically, what they're saying is that the reason that they're going, basically they're saying that our links make no sense. And what we're trying to say is that Syria is providing money and weapons to the Hamas and the Hezbollah, who are trying to stop the peace talks. So if we stop giving money to Syria, then that means that they can no longer give money. Then that means that we can no longer give money to the Hezbollah and the Hamas, which means that the peace talks will have a more smoother transition into ending, which means that the U.S. will no longer have to be in Israel, and all of that money that we have to put towards there will no longer having to be put towards there. And they're only going poorly. The peace talks are only going poorly because of the threats from the Hamas. And without the Hamas, without the Hezbollah pressuring the peace talks and trying to stop the peace talks, then the peace talks would finally be able to have an end after decades and millions of being killed. I have a lot to get through, and I'll get to your point at the end if I can. So now I'm going to go into their 5 contentions. Their first point is about there's going to be consequences for the entire region. And the only thing I have to say here is that there is no end in sight. Basically, they're basing their entire argument on the fact that they're basically saying that the region has a little bit of stability, and that there's so much stability in the Middle East, and that if we go militarily intervene in Syria, then suddenly we're going to be losing all the stability. All I have to point out is the fact that Syria needs military intervention. The fact that Syria is having this conflict proves that there is no stability in the region. So there's no end in sight, so we're only helping the problem by militarily intervening, because then Syria, and as we pointed out, Israel and Palestine will finally have some stability, more than they had before. So their second contention was about 64% do not believe that we should militarily intervene. Well, I'm going to point out that 100% of Americans believe in the social contract, and the entire point of this debate is the social contract. The fact that we need to establish that we need to uphold the social contract, the fact that we need to establish justice, provide for the common welfare, everything that we've learned since we were little children. Everyone believes in the social contract. Every American believes in our social contract. And just because 64% don't believe that we should militarily intervene in Syria doesn't outweigh the fact that we are upholding the social contract better by militarily intervening, as we point out in our three contentions. So their third contention was about the Security Council. I mean, basically they're saying we can't do this because the UN says that we can't. The fact is, we have the ultimate say. Obama is in charge of our military, the largest military in the world. We have the ultimate say. And my second refutation of this is the example of Kosovo. Yes, NATO said that we shouldn't do this. Said that we shouldn't have gone in, but we did anyways, and it worked out in the end. So when even looking at historical examples, we see that just because we don't listen to the UN doesn't mean that it's not going to work and that suddenly the world's going to explode. Now, their fourth contention was about discrimination, and that we can't tell if we're giving weapons to people to the wrong hands. But the point here is that, like I said before, the basic idea what we have so far for our plan is missiles. We're not handing weapons to strangers. We're not just going to send millions upon millions of guns over to Syria to just give to the community and say, hey, fight off the government. That's not what's going to happen. So far, our plan is that the missiles are going to be going over. There's no intermediate there. So for all those reasons, I urge a strong vote in the affirmation. Thank you.
If everyone is ready, then I will start time. I would like to start off my speech by thanking everyone for being here and making this debate possible, very educational. So, as a quick roadmap, I'll be going over my opponent's arguments and our refutations to what they've been saying, and then I'll be going over our 4 contentions and their refutations to it. So first off, I'm going to be starting with their case. Now, they said that as soon as we can, we'll have military intervention, and we're just going to go with whatever the government says. And my partner came up and said, well, we don't know what the government's going to say. How can we support something that we don't know what they're going to say? And they're like, what this debate is about is what we should do, not, oh, why should we do it, but what we should do. But Americans don't want this. Americans, yes, Tori.
So you're trying to say that we have no idea what we're doing, but as I pointed out in my last speech, we have an idea of sending missiles over. We're not just going to be sending guns over to random strangers in the country.
Yes, but our poll is saying that 64% of individuals and 9% of our country does not want to have this military intervention. We do not want this. Americans have clear support against this. And sorry, I have a lot of cover. I can't go over your first POI. Going into their case of justice, they've been saying, oh, the just war theory, we have humanitarian need. But as we said before, we have this for the social contract, which is our judging criteria. We don't have humanitarian need, which is a threat for us. We don't have it for the social contract. Right? This is not for the Americans. We are not supporting their social contract, we are supporting our social contract. Going into their case about credibility, they've been saying that, oh, we're going to cross this red line, we're going to lose credibility. By going into war and going against what the United Nations is saying, which we stated in our contention, we're going into war to go against the United Nations. That we will be losing credibility because we will be going against what the United Nations want. And we are a part of the United Nations. And if we do this, then we can, again, what they've been trying to say, that we support so much of this credibility that we want to keep, then they are going to be actually causing our country to lose it. Yes, I will take your second KOI.
So I'm just going to go back to the point where you said, wouldn't you agree that the Constitution is, even though it says establish justice, it's saying establish justice to provide for a better nation, and by militarily intervening through our 3 points, we are providing for a better nation and by establishing justice?
You're not, but the social contract is for the American people. We are not supporting the Syrians. You are supporting the Syrians, and that has nothing to do with the American people. Going into your third contention of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they said that we need more money to create these peace talks to go smoothly. Well, these peace talks are already occurring, and if the peace talks are actually doing well so far, or if we add more weapons and more to the situation, then we are actually going to cause more problems for these peace talks. That's what's going to end up happening. If we go in and militarily intervene in Syria, we are going to harm these peace talks. Now, going into our case, going into our first contention of conflict would increase. They said that more stability would occur if we allow for more weapons and more aid to go into it. But that's not true. If we support more weapons and we send more weapons into Syria and the Middle East, then we will cause more problems. And that's what we have evidence to say. More problems will happen. This has been shown with by 59% was not used what we agreed to use. They don't use the weapons exactly how we send them to be. They use the weapons however they want. And that would cause more problems in the long run, which is shown by the Iraqi war. Going into our second contention of public opinion, they said that 100% of the American people believe in the social contract. We cannot technically prove that 100% of the people believe in American people believe in the social contract. But we can prove that 64 of the individuals and 64% of the country says that we shouldn't do this, and 9% of the country says that we don't actually have the right to. And yes, I will take your PO.
Wouldn't you agree that the fact that 330 million people living in America proves that at least more than 64% agree with the social contract because they pay taxes?
Even when we pay taxes, some people don't even know what the social contract is. That's why you can't say that 100% of the American people believe in the social contract if we can't even prove how many people actually know the social contract. And even if you did, do you believe that newborns believe in it that are just born? Because those are Americans, and they can barely understand what hello means. I would like to thank everyone for being here and making this debate possible.
My rebuttal speech today. I'd like to once again thank everyone for being here and making this debate not only possible, but very educational and exciting. So before I begin, I'm just going to go over 3 voters or voting issues, reasons why the judge should vote for the negation team, and why the affirmation team only lost today's debate. My first voter is that the negation team has refuted the entire affirmation team's case, and then we refuted their defenses of their case. My partner just came up here and spent 7 minutes refuting their case and then rebuilding ours. So we have, in the end, they are left with no standing case, and we are left with not only a full case, but a partially refuted case. Because the affirmation team forgot to refute our subpoint B of contention 4 in our case. They never mentioned our evidence that concerned Pakistan abusing our aid in the past. So that means they agree that Pakistan abused our aid in the past, they accept it, and they are choosing to ignore that crucial piece of evidence that proves that aid in the Middle East has not been effective in the past. The affirmation team did bring up the Kosovo conflict in 1999 under the Clinton presidency. However, that was 14 years ago, and that was before 9/11. That was before such a huge conflict in the Middle East began between the United States and Middle Eastern countries. That was so long ago that so many things have changed. That's not reliable evidence. Our evidence is from 2009. Theirs is from 1999. Ours should stand over theirs. And so that brings me into my second brother. The affirmation team has failed to use proper citations throughout today's debate. They cited the just war theory. They didn't say where that came from. They didn't say why we should believe it. They didn't impact that out. However, the negation team has come up here, and for every contention and every refutation, we have given evidence. We have cited evidence. We have cited sources. We have cited first-person accounts from people such as the Iranian spokesman that wrote an article for the New York Times. They gave us these points about Israel and Palestine and Hezbollah and Hamas, but they never told us where they got that. They never told us why we should believe it. They never told us how they know that's true. In fact, that's what my POI was going to be, that was going to ask for that source. And they didn't accept that POI, so they could never give us a source on that. Finally, we gave many sources in our contentions, we gave many sources in our reputations. For example, we cited the Iranian spokesman, a first-hand account of what is going on in the Middle East. He should know better than anyone what is going to happen in the Middle East and what kind of terrorism is going to ensue. We cited the New York Times, we cited CBS, we cited Reuters in our poll, which said that 9% of Americans believe we actually should do anything in the Middle East. We cited the United Nations Charter, which the United States is a member of, and we said that we cannot violate this United Nations Charter, which says we have to first determine the existence of a threat to peace. We have to first decide what measures are going to be employed. We cited Harvard University in that study about Pakistan abusing our aid. So we have many sources, many believable sources. We have proven to you, Judge, that we are a credible team, and the affirmation team has not. They have dropped their burden on evidence. And then finally, my third voting issue is the main idea of today's debate, justice in the social contract, so the judging criteria. The negation team is the team more upholding the social contract because we are concerning the United States. We are wanting to keep the United States here intact on our soil, not invading foreign lands. So we are helping the American people. We are upholding the social contract. We are doing what our government's aim is to do. The affirmation team is focusing on the needs of the Middle East, a little country in the Middle East that we can't get involved with for all of the reasons that the negation team has listed through today's debate. The affirmation team would just be adding fire to fire. As we said in our contentions, that giving more military aid, putting more weapons in the Middle East, that's just going to create more conflict. It's just going to explode even more. That's going to backfire in our faces, like it did in the Palestine instance, where they ended up using the aid we gave them against other countries and against us. So what the affirmation wants to do will be threatening ourselves. They would actually be violating the social contract more than upholding it. So the negation team here is the team that has more rightly upheld the judging criteria in today's debate, the reason why you should vote for us, and we are more benefiting to the American people. So with that, I'd like to urge your vote in favor of the negation team. Thank
today's debate, and it's a pleasure to end today's debate. I'd like to once again thank everyone for being here, my partner, the opponents, the whittled down audience, and the last standing judge for making today's debate possible. So in today's speech, I'm not going to be focusing on everything that's been said back and forth. I'm not going to be jumping onto that train and all the arguments that have been said, but I'm simply going to take a step back from today's debate and see that once the smoke clears, after all these arguments are over with, who has won today's debate and why? Why has the affirmative won today's debate? And I'll give you 3 reasons in the form of voting issues. But sadly, before I can go into my voting issues, I have to first start with a couple observations. My first observation being stuff that was said in my opponent's rebuttal. This is our first time to respond to it, so we're going to respond to it now. We're going to look. They first said that they argued against all of our contentions and then they rebuilt all of their contentions. Now that's not actually true. Again, analyzing on what's happening in today's debate, the second speaker for the negation dropped their own third and fourth contention. They never refuted or rebuilt those contentions. So when my opponent says that and asserts that their contentions still stand, they actually don't. Their third contention was about how the UN says we shouldn't. My partner said, we brought up the example of Kosovo and said how even though the UN did not agree with it and accept it, it worked out in the end and it was a good thing to do and we're glad that we did it. And then their fourth contention was about how it's discriminatory. And then my partner brought up the fact that it's actually not discriminatory. We have a good deal of knowledge on what's going to happen, so we can understand and we know what will happen. We will. And so that's a big deal, and they dropped those 2 contentions. My second observation is how they argue that they have a whole bunch of awesome evidence and we don't have any evidence. I would just like to remind you of the fact that we cited Huffington Post, we cited Pew Research, and we also cited USA Today talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So when they argue we don't have evidence, we actually do have evidence, and so those everything that they base their rebuttal off of shouldn't actually stand. So I'm going to jump into voters now. These are the meat of my speech. The first voter is this idea of the social contract. We have to understand here that as our judging criteria, the social contract, it's imperative that we uphold what the government promises they will give to the people. And there are many promises made by the government, most of which we addressed in my first speech and then through our contentions. When we talk about justice, we understand that the government promises to establish justice not only for us, but justice to ensure a better nation. And by upholding justice, by making an act that is just, like my partner argued, we will be making the United States a better nation. And so that's one of the parts of the social contract that we upheld, but we also upheld the idea of providing for the common defense when we argue credibility. And we also uphold general welfare when we argue the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So it's imperative that you vote for the affirmative because we are upholding the social contract. We make points that make sense. We make points that uphold what the government promised to give us, and we also make points that were fought for and advocated for by 1.3 million Americans who gave their lives to support the social contract. So moving into my second voter is this idea of credibility. Another reason why you must vote for the affirmative is because of this point of credibility and how we made a threat and now we must act and we must uphold this threat and we must withstand with our credibility. You have to understand the fact that if we go with the status quo like my opponents advocated for, we will lose a significant portion of our credibility, making the United States open to attacks from foreign countries in a much less secure place, impacting out to again the social contract. Providing for the common defense is another thing that the United States federal government says that they will do, and if we lose all of this credibility, we'll no longer be able to uphold that promise. So moving lastly to my third voter is this idea of the judging criteria, again, the importance of the social contract. My opponents came up here and they gave some actually contradictory they uphold the social contract. The social contract's great. They agree, and they win because of that. But the second speaker came up here and said that not everyone agrees with the social contract. They said that the social contract isn't as important as they would like you to think. They say that we can't really record that, and not everyone even knows what the social contract is. So we are telling you what the social contract is in today's debate. We are telling you that we are upholding the social contract in today's debate, and we are telling you that the social contract is important. So regardless of the fact that my opponents seem to be a little confused on whether or not the social contract makes sense, we uphold it and we win based on our three contentions. So based on the idea of justice, based on the idea that we are upholding and keeping our credibility, and based on the idea that we can finally end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I urge a strong vote for the affirmative in today's debate.